This podcast is sponsored by nobody. Hey dudes, welcome to Splat from the Past, the only 80s themed horror and sci-fi show where things can get totally radical. Now today I will be welcoming a guitar legend slash virtuoso, and I'm talking about Marc Ferrari. You all know him as the original guitarist in Keel, the 80s metal band from LA that had such classic hits as The Right to Rock and Rock and Roll Outlaw and Tears of Fire, which he wrote. And we're going to talk about that stuff today. Talk about he had other bands, Cold Sweat and Medicine Wheel. And he's one of the members of Crucial Taunt in the Wayne's World movies. And of course, I got to bring that up because I've talked to people from the Wayne's World movies and stuff, and I love Wayne's World. It's one of my favorite movies of all time, which I'm sure he hears every single day, but fuck it. And he's also an entrepreneur. He started a company that deals with publishing and stuff regarding music called Master Source. I'll find out more about it in a bit. And he also writes children's books too, which is bizarre, but I'll find out more. And also, rest in peace, John Mayall, the forefather of the British blues. He gave breaks to Mick Fleetwood, Jack Bruce, Eric Clapton, etc. If it wasn't for him, probably the Rolling Stones and the Yardbirds wouldn't have had the confidence to rock out to the blues during the British invasion. I mean, the guy is a master, and it's a sad, sad loss. Rest in peace, John Mayall. Also, rest in peace, Duke from the Four Tops. I've never been able to pronounce his real name. Abdul Faker, Faker, something like that. He was the only original member left, and man, what an amazing success story the Four Tops had leading up to their success. It was a decade before they got successful back in the 50s and 60s. Rest in peace, Duke. So yeah, here is my interview with Marc Ferrari. So, going back in time, what age did you start gravitating toward music?
Probably in the womb. Probably in the womb. But as far as starting to play guitar, I was 8. I was 8 years old when I started playing guitar. At first it was a borrowed guitar from a cousin, and then for my 9th birthday, my parents bought me my own guitar.
Mm. Did you come from a family of musicians?
No, not really. I mean, my mom and dad both played a little bit in college or up to college. My mom saxophone, my dad piano, but they weren't musicians, you know. They just piddled around with it.
Nice.
So yeah, I would say no, I didn't come from an overtly musical family.
Do you remember the first album you ever bought with your own money?
I think it would have been Led Zeppelin, the 4th album.
Nice.
I'm pretty sure. I do remember buying some Kiss albums pretty early too. But I'm gonna go with Led Zeppelin 4.
Nice. How about do you remember the first live album you ever bought?
Well, that would have been Kiss Alive, probably.
Okay.
You know, Kiss Alive 1, which would have been 76. I saw Kiss in 1976, and yeah, so that's kind of, after seeing those guys live, I kind of knew what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. You know, I wanted to be up there too, making noise and being on stage and being part of that excitement.
Nice, nice. So you formed your first band, Whiplash, at 13, and the rest of the guys in the band were older than you, but yet you were their leader.
Yes, that is correct. And we were professional in the sense that we actually did get paid to play. So I guess that makes you professional if you get paid to play. So we were playing campgrounds back then and backyard parties.
Yeah, what kind of covers did you guys play?
Well, all the silly rock stuff at the time, would have been a little Nugent, Aerosmith, Leonard Skinner, I'm sure, Kiss, stuff like that. The classic rock stuff that was. This would have been, of course, summer of '75. So probably a little Bachman Turner Overdrive.
Yeah.
They were pretty popular. Yeah.
Maybe UFO.
Well, I didn't get into UFO till a little bit later. I didn't get into Schenker and UFO till probably 1979 or 1980.
Nice. Yeah, because I'm always often curious at how people discovered UFO because, they were never the biggest band in the world, but yet they were so good and they did have like an underground following like AC/DC did in the early years.
Mm-hmm. And I saw AC/DC as an opener 2 or 3 times.
Yeah. That must have been killer with Bond. That guy was a wild man.
Absolutely.
And then after your senior year, you joined Steel Assassin, which was more like a new wave of heavy metal band like Judas Priest and Saxon. Do you think that because the style of that music was so esoteric, that's why you guys couldn't catch on?
Well, Steel Assassin was a local, essentially a local band.
Mm-hmm.
We only played gigs in the Boston area, and not that many. No, maybe because the new wave, we were into the new wave of British heavy metal bands, as you mentioned, stuff like Saxon and Priest and Scorpions and Maiden and early Def Leppard and, some bands like Angel Witch and Quartz, and,
Yeah.
Samson, which was the band that Bruce Dickinson came out of. I think we were kind of ahead of our time in that regard, that we were finding these bands very, very early,
Mm-hmm.
But Steel Assassin was a local band, and, the demos that we did record were pretty basic, and I wouldn't call them great songs listening to them now.
Yeah. Now, in the early 80s, leading up to moving to LA, you were in Boston. Did you ever go back to New York and see the rock scene there?
Well, we actually played. I was in a couple of bands in the Boston area that did go to New York for gigs. I remember I think we played the Peppermint Lounge once, a long, long time ago, at some showcases.
Mm-hmm.
It was like, it didn't take that long to drive from Boston to New York, so we went down there pretty frequently, actually.
Do you remember a guy named Jack Starr?
Jack Starr. Remind me about Jack Starr.
He was a New York-based guitar virtuoso. He had he had several bands, but that guy could play. I've discovered him in the last few years because I interviewed Greg D'Angelo from White Lion. He was in Jack Starr's band for a brief time, and I was listening to this stuff on YouTube. I was like, damn, this guy can jam.
Wasn't familiar with him, but the New York scene back then, would have been like Riot, Twisted Sister,
right.
The band Riot, who I loved. Who else was pretty big back then? The Rods were kind of making some noise.
Zebra.
Zebra, yeah, a little bit of Zebra. But certainly Riot and Twisted Sister we were well aware of, back in the day.
Yeah, because they were like the first ones out of the so-called glam metal, era that like really, broke open the doors for everybody.
Mm. You're definitely going back a long time here. We're talking early '80s, so 40 years ago.
Yeah,
pretty crazy.
So you met Mike Vardy through his Guitar Magazine column. You two were pen pals, so that's what brought you out to L.A.
Well, he didn't bring me out to L.A., but I brought myself out to L.A. with the rest of the cover band that I was in at the time. But he plays a tremendous part of my story because he introduced me to Ron Keel. I had just been in L.A. for maybe a month when I ran into him at a store.
Yeah, and he sent you the Steeler album. What did you think of that album?
Oh, I loved it. Of course, Yngwie was getting a big buzz at the time. He was, the guy people were talking about back in 1983. You know, he was the next guitar hero. You know, went from Van Halen to Randy Rhoads to him. You know.
Yeah, he had been in Alcatraz.
Well, Alcatraz came after Steeler.
Oh, it did? Oh, I thought.
Oh yeah, Ron Keel and Mike Vardy made arrangements for Yngwie to move to the States.
Oh, okay.
Arranged for his visa and everything. Yeah. Alcatraz was 1984. Steeler was 83.
Oh, okay. Okay. So you move out to L.A., you meet Ron, and you two hit it off right away. Do you start writing songs?
Well, I had some songs with me, but Ron was a prolific writer, and Ron he had a kind of a backlog of songs. You know, some of the stuff he was doing with Steeler. A couple of those songs made it to the first Keel album. But on that first album, I did have one song called "Born Ready," which I wrote. Very AC/DC-ish, as you can tell. And then the following record, The Final Frontier, I think I wrote four songs, maybe five, I can't recall right now. But, my writing, Ron pushed me. We kind of pushed each other, We both wanted to write the best songs, know? And, I'm reminded of a saying that goes something like, high tide raises all ships, right? Mm-hmm. So, we were pushing each other, to write killer riffs and songs, and the whole band benefited from it,
Yeah. Yeah, I want to ask you about songs that you either wrote or co-wrote. Born Ready, I mean, when I hear that song, it does remind me of AC/DC, but it also reminds me of Ted Nugent's Stranglehold with some late 70s punk influence. Was that any source of influence as well?
Well, I'm sure the Nugent thing is subconscious in me, because he was such a heavy influence on me, back in the day. Ted Nugent was, one of the premier guitar heroes. You had Van Halen, but, actually Nugent predates Van Halen. Nugent was big in 75, 76.
Yeah.
I think Cat Scratch Fever and the album before that, Free For All, came out in 75 or 76. But certainly, Ted is an influence on me, as is the other blues-based guys that I was listening to back then. Joe Perry, Pat Travers.
The best.
Yeah, Pat Travers, a huge influence on me. Now he's a dear friend. Robin Trower, Jimmy Page, Ace Frehley. These are all blues-based guys.
Yeah. Remember Sabu?
Sabu.
Paul Sabu.
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah, he was good. He still is. The Right to Rock, which is a song that you co-wrote, that was you guys responding to the whole Dee Snider, Tipper Gore censorship thing at the time, right?
Exactly. Yeah, well, the music, I wrote the majority of the music, and then Ron put lyrics to it. Mm-hmm. So classic example of collaboration. Where something starts with one person, the other person takes it and runs with it.
Yeah. I noticed you guys didn't seem to have that much censorship problems. There was never, parental advisory stickers on your CDs.
I don't recall there being parental advisory stickers on our CDs. We probably wanted to have one because you were selling more records if you had it. Yeah. That was the irony of the whole thing,
Yeah. It was like a badge of honor.
Yeah, exactly.
And that video, oh my God, that video is hilarious with the mob guys.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a funny thing. I mean, I think when you look at it, it said it was set in 1999. Of course, we've moved well past that date,
Yeah.
That album came out, the single came out in 1985, so it was only 14 years in the future.
Yeah, back then everyone predicted the future and then was wrong when it happened.
That's funny.
Yeah. Tears of Fire. I love that song. You know, I don't think that Ron ever sounded so sweet and vulnerable on a song ever. Was that MCA coming to you guys and saying, okay, it's your turn to have a hit power ballad?
Well, no. I remember I wrote it. I was dating the other Brian Jay's sister at the time, or the guitar player, and I was a naughty boy on the road, and that was my that was my apology to her.
Yeah.
But no, I don't recall them coming to us and saying, "Hey, you have to have a ballad." But in 1986, certainly the power ballad was, you had Doc and were doing it. I think Motley Crue probably had one or two.
Yep.
And most of the bands back then were doing ballads. So, but this one happened pretty organically.
Yeah, it's a beautiful song. It should have been a huge hit, but then again,
thank you.
Yeah, I mean, then again, you guys were competing with so many other bands at the time.
Well, yes, we were. We certainly were in the mix with that whole era, but it was a pretty big mix, as you know. There were dozens of bands that were signed back then.
Nightfall. I'm curious, was that influenced by like Eddie Van Halen's early acoustic instrumentals on the Van Halen records?
More so, Michael Schenker.
Oh.
Yeah, Michael Schenker was a huge and continues to be a huge influence on me, because I think he combines speed and fluidity and melodicness and power and passion. Michael Schenker had instrumentals on most of. I mean, there was were one or two on the UFO albums, and then on the Michael Schenker albums, he had instrumentals. So it was more my homage to him than anything.
Yeah, and it's funny, his brother plays great too, and I feel like that they influence each other in the way they play.
Well, don't forget they were Michael was in the Scorpions very, very early on, and then rejoined in 1979 for Love Drive.
Yeah, that's a great record. Great record. I love how in the Final Frontier you guys do a little memorial for the Challenger victims. That was really cool, I thought.
Well, thank you. Yeah, that happened. After we had finished the album, we added that in. And there's also a dedication to Phil Lynott too. It was we all love Phil Lynott, so both of those events happened pretty close to each other.
Yeah. Gene Simmons, he produced The Right to Rock and The Final Frontier, obviously a hero of yours. What was he like as a producer to work with?
Well, he was great. I get asked this question a lot, and he was very helpful to us in a number of ways. First of all, as a musician, he speaks the musician's language, and he was very helpful in arrangement ideas, and also very helpful in getting the best performances out of us. And he was helpful as kind of being a referee too, because a lot of times bands are very opinionated and have can have some issues, inter-band issues, and he was a very kind of a neutral ground. So.
Yeah, and he was going through a period then, I think, too, because he was so successful. He was very generous in producing other bands. Like, he also produced Black and Blue at the same time.
Well, Black and Blue came a little later. We were 1985, and actually, The Right to Rock was recorded in 1984, released in 85. And then The Final Frontier was recorded in 85 and released in 86. So he started working with Black and Blue, I think, a year or so later. And then there were other bands that he had worked with, the band EZO, I know he worked with Wendy O. Williams and a few others. So we love Gene.
Oh, yeah. And he's still out there, still performing, as we can see. Among the many bands you guys opened for, you opened for Dio. That must have been amazing.
Well, absolutely. And very coincidentally, my second band, Cold Sweat, also opened for Dio. But Keel opened up for Dio in Europe. We did our only European tour. The only time we ever got to Europe was opening for Dio. And, yeah, I mean, just to watch the greatness of Ronnie Dio night after night, he's so consistent. And it was amazing, like you said.
Did you ever get to talk to him or maybe get some wisdom or insight?
Oh, yeah. A lot of time with him. And he also produced some of the demos for Cold Sweat that helped Cold Sweat get signed. So, yeah, I spent a lot of time with Ronnie, and very, very lucky that I got to have that time with him.
Yeah, I don't know how a guy of that level of rock fame managed to stay so humble and yet also never touch a drop of booze or drug. I mean, that doesn't happen in this business that often.
Well, I think he liked beer. I don't know about the booze part, but he liked his beer. So, but he wasn't known for being a drunk or anything. He if that's what you mean.
Yeah, I didn't realize that, but that's good though. You know, he kept himself grounded.
That's a good word. He was very grounded.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you leave Keel and you record albums with the bands Cold Sweat and Medicine Wheel, and I've listened to those records. They're great. But I'm curious, did you guys ever make music videos for those bands?
Well, Cold Sweat had one video.
Mm-hmm.
Our one video was for the song "Let's Make Love Tonight." That was, an official MTV video. That Ronnie Dio actually is in there a little bit.
Nice.
But Medicine Wheel was more of a recording project. So we didn't do a video for that band. We did actually go to Japan once, but for the most part, it was a recording project.
Nice. So you guys weren't like heavily promoted by the label like all the other bands at the time.
Well, I don't. Some of my bandmates may disagree with that. When we're talking about Cold Sweat, we were on MCA Records. They had a ton of other bands at the time, and I'm not sure we got the right push. Yeah. And again, the Medicine Wheel projects were on independent labels, most of them out of Europe, so there really wasn't a lot of domestic promotion for those records.
MCA made millions with Night Ranger, and then after those guys were gone, there was Jet Boy and Trickster, and then you guys. It seems like you guys didn't get heavily promoted like you should have. Like maybe they were just over the whole the glam scene by that point.
Yeah, and it was again it was kind of during the time that grunge started to come into play. And, you're right. There were so many other bands on not only that label, but all the labels. There was just a glut of commercial hard rock bands. So,
I know that Penelope Spheris directed the Keel video for Rock and Roll Outlawed. That's how you got into Wayne's World movies?
Yeah, that is absolutely correct. Yep.
Yeah, my dad took me to see both of those movies. I loved them, especially the first. Were they fun to do?
Oh, it was amazing. It was such an amazing experience to be part of that whole big machine, and to be, in the presence of all these comedy greats, Dana Carvey, Mike Myers, the list goes on and on. Chris Farley was in Wayne's World 2. Just hanging out with those guys was just such a treat.
Yeah, they're laugh out loud hilarious. And I always thought that version of Why You Want to Break My Heart was way better than Dwight Twillie's, and I love Twillie. I think he was an underrated musician, but I don't know. I think you guys did a better version of it.
Yeah, well, that was already recorded when all the songs that the Crucial Taunt band did in the film, they were already recorded when I got hired.
Oh, okay. It was pretty good. Did you guys have to rehearse the hell out of Ballroom Blitz? Because it sounds like it's...
yeah, we had to make sure that we were getting the fingerings right and everything. By the way, our Crucial Taunt band actually did play live at the party. We had a rap party, and we played there that night. So we were a functioning band. And I remember Dana Carvey came up and jammed with us.
Oh yeah, he was on the drums, right?
Yeah, he was a decent drummer.
Yeah, I mean that song. I mean, it sounds very well rehearsed and well played. I mean, I was like, yeah, they must have did that song, over and over again until they got it right.
Well, again, we wanted to make sure we were looking like we were a real band, So.
Yeah. And you guys do that little music video sequence in the caveman loincloth, and Tia Carrere's got that snake. Do you remember if she was scared of that snake?
No, I don't think so. I think it was pretty tame, and it wasn't poisonous.
Mm-hmm.
And she's brave, by the way. I'm still in touch with her. She lives very close to me, and we're still seeing our whole band still stays in touch with each other.
She's a very talented lady.
And she's very down to earth, very sweet. Yeah.
Very talented. Yeah. So how do you come to start Master Source?
Well, it was kind of accidental. I started getting some songs of mine, some demos of mine used in TV shows and films, really quite accidentally. I had friends that were working on some of these shows, and they would try to find a piece of music for the director, and that's how it started. And it just grew on me really quickly because I hit on a good idea. I was providing music that sounded like it could have been Van Halen or whoever it was for a fraction of the price. And very quickly. So. That's how I got started with that whole thing. It was just, as I mentioned, pretty accidental.
Did you see it coming that in the digital era musicians were going to have trouble collecting royalties and licensing music?
Well, actually, the digital era made it easier for them to create music,
Right.
As most guys these days, you don't have to go into a recording studio anymore, Most guys are producing major label quality recordings on their laptops, with plugins. So that whole thing has allowed musicians. It's allowed the playing field to become easier. It's an easier entry point.
Yeah. I mean, 20 years ago, when rock concerts started getting more expensive, it mind-boggled me at the time. But now I know why. It's because they need to make their living touring because they can't collect anything on record sales anymore.
Yeah, well, that's what it's come down to now, because music has been devalued with the advent of the internet age. We kind of survived the whole Napster thing.
Yeah.
But now Spotify is, it's a two-edged sword, It's really, overall, I think, devalued music.
Yeah, and...
Because people aren't buying albums anymore. They can stream it, You're not buying music, you're renting it now.
Yeah, and it also, too, it's like, I feel like that rock is kind of dead in terms of new content, because everybody has to figure out where it's being streamed or whatever and stuff. But I think rock lives on the radio and the streaming at least.
Yeah, well, I still think there's some really good rock bands out there, but it is becoming more difficult for a new band to break out, I think.
Yes.
At least back in the day when we came out, there was, if you were signed, there was somewhat of a machine behind you. You were making a video, you were getting a publicist hired, you were going on the road. But now there's just so many people doing this that it's diluted. It's diluted things, I think.
Absolutely. Are you still writing kids' books?
I just wrote the one.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if there's a sequel in there or not, but it was another facet, just another part of my life. I'm a 2-time published author.
Yeah.
I also wrote the book Rockstar 101, which came out back in 2002. So.
Yeah. But what made you want to write a children's book?
Well, it was really because of my daughter. My daughter was very time challenged. She still is as a young adult, but it was very, very apparent when she was younger that she was time challenged. So I actually wrote it about her and wrote it for her, and it turned into something bigger. It turned it into something that I've had so many people tell me that they have not only time challenged kids, but they have a time challenged spouse or a time challenged sibling, and they bought the book as kind of a joke for them, but it just goes to show you that there's dilly-dalliers and lollygaggers in lots of families.
Absolutely. Do you have anything upcoming?
Well, Cold Sweat is getting some love this year. We already played the M3 Festival.
Nice.
And in about a month, we're going to be heading to Tennessee to play the Monsters on the Mountain Festival. And Cold Sweat is also booked on the 2025 Monsters of Rock cruise.
Nice.
Meanwhile, Keel just dropped a new single that you can find on YouTube. It's called Moving Target.
Oh, you play on that?
Yeah, that's the Keel song. I co-wrote it. And yes, did play on it. And that's going to be on Ron's new release called Keel World, which I believe is coming out within the month. And this is Keel's 40-year anniversary, where we're hoping to get some love too out there with some of the shows out there.
Yeah, fucking congrats, man. That is so awesome. 40 years of Keel.
40.
It seems like yesterday, doesn't it?
I'm lucky. I remember a lot of the stuff that happened 40 years ago. So, there you go.
Mark, this has been a tremendous honor. Thank you so much for coming on today. And
you're welcome.
I'm going to go check out that Moving Target song, and I hope you have some fun on the road there and be safe out there.
Thanks so much. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Take care. Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye. Well, there you have it. Marc Ferrari. Ain't he a cool dude? Nice guy, huh? Real humble guy, and I'm glad that we got to reminisce some Keel and Wayne's World and his other band stuff there for a short time, and I'm glad he's still with Cold Sweat and Keel and still rocking. Go check out that single Moving Target. I'm glad that he wrote it and he played on it, and stuff. I didn't know he was still playing with the band. I'm glad to find that out. Well, until next time, this is Tommy Throwback Kovac saying there's no shame in living in the past because the present sucks. Later, dudes!